Welcome to another episode of the Evolution of Work show. I'm your host, Dave Clare, and I have a very special guest with us today, Geoffrey Roche. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Geoffrey. Is it Roche or Roche?
Roche is right. Yep.
Roche is right. Beautiful. Jeff is the son of a nurse, a healthcare expert, a diversity advocate, and education enthusiast. Presently serving as the inaugural North American Director of Workforce Development at Siemens Health in Years. That's an interesting concept. I'd love to find out more about what that means. He's also executive advisor with Leader 3 and the National Healthcare Practice Executive Advisor at Core Education PBC. Jeff often speaks on healthcare workforce topics at national conferences such as Becker's annual conference. There's a whole bunch of other ones he speaks at as well. But in 2022, he was nominated to the Forbes Business Council for his national level work. Jeff, hope you don't mind me calling you Jeff, or you prefer Geoffrey?
Geoffrey is fine.
Okay, Geoffrey, no problem, sorry. Geoffrey has over 9 years of experience in hospital administration and has held leadership positions at various universities in the United States. He has also served on various boards and committees, including the United Way of North Carolina, United Way of Lebanon County, United Way of Pennsylvania, and Patient Safety Committee for WellSpan Good Samaritan Hospital. Geoffrey also serves as a senior advisor with eConsult Solutions, partner with Product 10X, DNPs of Color Advisory Committee, and Levitt School of Health Advisory Council at Western Governors University, and strategic advisor at numerous startups. While he focuses on inspiring and equipping leaders in the Eds and Meds to come together, innovate, and solve the most pressing leadership and cultural issues so that the workforce is transformed, I am sure that all of us here in all industries can learn from his wisdom and insights. So please welcome our heart leader, our people connector, and our future of work educator, Geoffrey. Jeff, welcome to the Evolution of Work podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Mate, that is an impressive bio. I would really appreciate if you can share a little bit of your journey. I mean, like there's so much in there. We could just unpack your bio, I am sure, for this whole podcast. But if you could just share a little bit about your journey and what led you to focus on, this sense of love for leadership, being a heart leader and culture within the evolving world of work.
Yeah. So Dave, so good to be here with you. And obviously, thank you for all that you do around these topics and important dialogue on leadership. For me, my journey obviously started in many ways with a mentorship and support of my mother, who, was a single mom and was, in fact, I can remember attending her graduation when I was 5. And then I can remember all her work as a single mom, as a nurse,
Wow.
Every moment of the way. But, despite certainly all of that, certainly my mother's influence is what brought me into healthcare without question. I was so blessed when I started my healthcare journey of my career to have a nurse CEO, ironically. It's kind of one of those things, I guess, grew up with a mom that was a nurse and then had a nurse CEO, which oftentimes in the US can be fairly rare. Would love to see it more.
Yes.
But my CEO was such an amazing leader who just really took it upon herself to say, she knew that, as she will often say, she's like, I knew there was something special about you. And so she mentored me, coached me, I say sometimes threw me into the fire to test me and allowed me to lead like no other way that I could have. And so that was really the journey that set me on to really not only want to grow as a leader, but also to help others grow as a leader. And I was fortunate during my tenure at the health system to also support a number of other people because of the fact of how she led me, and then other senior vice presidents who just really pour their heart and soul into making me who I am today.
Yeah, mate, thank you so much for sharing that. And isn't it funny how we have those people who just, I could probably list a whole handful of the people that made that impact on me in my life. Yeah, and I've always said, I am who I am today as a leader, thanks to the leaders that I've worked with, that some of the most inspiring and powerful leaders in the world today, that nobody would even know who they are unless they had the opportunity to work with them.
Yep, so true.
Yeah. So what drives your passion then for, this sense of heart-centered leadership, culture? You say you love leadership, you're a heart leader, culture. What drives your passion for that in today's workplace?
Yeah. You know, Dave, in many ways, when I look back, what drives that passion was, I tell people all the time, it was that first experience of those 9, almost 10 years in my healthcare system, where I saw true leaders, certainly some that had a lot of work to do, but others who just truly cared for people. And then after that experience, I came into, other organizations since then, and I just have not seen the same level of people who just genuinely care about other people.
Yeah, wow.
And I was in a circumstance serving in a startup in an executive role where I really saw how toxic and impactful bad leadership can be.
Hmm.
And it was really in that experience where I thought to myself, wow, I had the most amazing leadership experience, but it was the first job and first part of my career. And yet I haven't experienced that to the same level again. So obviously I have to do something to help change that. And so I started to really not just further study, but really start to almost unpack why I cared so much about it. And
Hmm.
in many ways, I took risky decisions that ultimately, ended up me not being a part of that organization because I challenged those aspects of leadership that to me were just so unhealthy and so not positive for everyone in the organization. And so that's what I would say really brought me to really further want to delve in and understand this as a commitment from my end.
Yeah, I love the fact that were you left those organizations because they weren't willing to handle the challenge. Sometimes I think people are. I'm trying to word this in a way where it doesn't sound insulting to many, but that they almost sell their soul to stay where they are.
Hmm.
And then because the fear of not getting another job or finding the work, but I guess as especially when you reach my age, and like the wisdom is like I would gladly walk away from something where I didn't think it was right.
Yep.
No matter what the cost was to me financially or whatever, I remember actually leaving one career and I left a bonus of $28,000, 1 month away from a $28,000 bonus on the table because I could no longer work in the toxic environment in which I was earning that bonus.
Yep.
And you know what? It was worth every penny.
Yep.
Yeah. So when you think about, Geoffrey, when you think about, let's get some insights and perspectives going here. In your view, what do you see as the most significant changes shaping the future of work today?
Yeah. To your point, I mean, obviously there's so many, right? I mean, you have the technology
Yep.
aspect. You certainly have, I would say, more, because of the fact that there's so much activity on social media and because of the fact that information is real time, we now know what the real time workplace issues are.
Hmm.
So just, for example, this morning I woke up and was able to go on LinkedIn and saw, a post from a colleague that shared a story ended their life.
Oh,
These are the types of things that we now have real-time information on that I think we as leaders have to really own because we now know it and we can actually act on it. I'll
hmm.
give you another example, and I was just talking about this recently in a group of risk managers, and many would say, "Well, that's an interesting group to be speaking to about these topics." But I was making the case to risk managers that as a risk manager in a healthcare environment, they should care about mental health of the workplace. And when we started that dialogue, many of them were looking at me like, why, why? But at the end of the dialogue, every one of them, of the 75 to 100 people in that room, acknowledged that they should own it. Because ultimately, as leaders, how we interact, how we treat, how we value, how we appreciate one another has a huge impact. And I call it a make it or break it moment.
Wow.
And so to me, these issues are paramount. That as leaders, we've got to choose to make it, or unfortunately, some are choosing to break it for people. There was a very powerful letter to the editor that I encourage everyone to read, should they not have seen it in the United States. That was actually written by a nurse who her name was Nurse Tristan. Her life ended because of all the stress and burnout and moral trauma, as she called it, in her healthcare system. When she passed, her father found the letter, published the letter to the editor, in her local Ohio newspaper. And when you read this letter, it absolutely infuriates you, but it also makes you sad because you realize there are leaders in that healthcare system. There's board members in that healthcare system who clearly have not created a safe culture, have clearly not dealt with some of the most challenging aspects that we all face in a healthcare culture. And yet, even though in her letter she cites it was reported, it was reported, it was reported, ultimately led to the end of her life.
Jeez.
And I have to say, and I said this to the group, how many other nurse Tristans are there out there?
Oh.
And the room sunk. But that's the true reality that I think as leaders we need to ask. And then we have to ask ourselves, are we creating that or are we changing it for those nurse Tristans? And it goes across industries. I'm just obviously so focused on healthcare, so using that as an example.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, raises the question, what kind of system do we have when we can't even care for the carers?
Yep.
Right. And
which is such a great question, right? Because, and I'm sure you know this, mental health in the workplace in the United States, certainly I can't speak globally. I don't have that expertise, but mental health in the workplace is the #1 workplace issue today.
Yeah.
And when you look at study after study, what is clear in there is it's all generated by managers.
Yes.
Majority, I should say. I shouldn't say all, but majority of it is generated by managers.
Yeah, and but the sad state of affairs with that, Geoffrey, is the fact that, and I talk about this a lot when it comes to performance management. People want to put somebody on performance management. In most cases, the only person who should be on performance management is the manager because they do not know how to help other people become the best version of themselves to do their life's best work while they're in their care and beyond. And therefore, you're the one not doing your job to the highest level. Now, the system has failed that person as well because we've promoted somebody beyond their competency. And in no stage, because, well, once again, because they were good at whatever the science or the numbers of the things they were doing, now we put them in charge of people, and they don't know how to help people become, from a leadership point of view. And so now these managers are there, and so the whole system is why I say the leadership is broken because most of what we call leadership is modern management practices. And we've lost the sight that we actually lead people, we manage resources, and people are not a resource. Resources for humans, not humans as a resource.
Yep.
And I have these little quirky quotes that I use. They're called clarisms. It's sometimes a little quirky quote that falls out of my mouth that sometimes just makes sense. And when your organization only cares about the numbers, don't be surprised when you're actually treated like one. Right. And so organizations, they just look at say, Nurse Tristan's, like, we just get another one. We'll just, keep working you until you fry or burn out, and then we'll get somebody else to do it. And
like a commodity.
That is a broken system.
Yeah.
So when we get to, so thank you for sharing that. I've made note of that. I'll make sure I make that in the show notes if anybody to look at the letter to the editor about Nurse Tristan. And I love the concept of make it or break it. So thank you for sharing that. So let's take it to a more productive space. So from a leadership point of view, you talk a lot about, culture, employee engagement, retention. So in the future of work, or what I'd like to call the present of work, because it's already here, talk to me a little bit about what is leadership's role, do you see, or what can leaders do to drive higher levels of engagement, keep that, your top talent around, and build that invincible culture?
Yeah. So obviously, I think that there's such an important element around embedding mentorship and coaching without question. Yeah. I think when people enter an organization, there has to be some level of creating mentorship for them right away.
Yep.
But mentorship has to be done very carefully because I think oftentimes we view it and we think, oh, just assign them a mentor. That's what we do in the workplace. But the reality of it is we assign them somebody who just doesn't connect with them, or we assign them somebody who just really doesn't understand them. And so the first thing that I think is critical is all leaders have to create a sense of belonging. Yes. And then through that, you get to know the connection points within that may be that right mentor for another person.
Yep.
The other element that I think is critical is when you talk about employee engagement, to your earlier point, you certainly can link employee engagement to performance, but that means the manager has to be linked too.
Yes.
And the only way you're going to ever really move engagement is if the manager is also held to that. And so I think today, at least in the United States, everyone wants to do these, regular pecan employee engagement surveys. But the reality of it is that you have to wonder, are they truly anonymous? And if you don't have a sense of safety, you're not going to fill that out.
Yeah.
Even if you feel that it may be anonymous, because there's always going to be something in you that says, I wonder who has access to that information.
Yeah.
So I think, we still have just kind of these systems that are set up that just cause a lot of challenges around this. The other point I would make, though, that I think is super critical around your point about productivity on this, or positivity around this, is I'm a huge fan of, leaders need to engage with all facets of the organization. And so if you're a leader, you better have an interdisciplinary group of employees that are helping you drive the culture. Don't just have your management team talking about culture. Create an interdisciplinary group of, if it's in healthcare, you better have some housekeepers or environmental services, food services, nurses, surge techs, all the way up. Because the reality of it is when you're in that interdisciplinary nature, you're going to hear stuff that's going to change it. One of the things I've noticed about employee engagement that I always think is so interesting is that you've got to work on your culture every day. So when you issue that employee engagement survey, now is not the time to issue a report of all that you as an organization have done for them.
Yeah.
They better know that all the time. But we hear it. I was just at the airport recently, and I heard an HR leader say to the CEO of another, I didn't know them, but I could tell it was the CEO and it was the director of HR. She said, "Oh, we're going to be issuing that employee engagement. Do you want to have a letter go out from you highlighting the years of achievement that we've done for our employees?" And I immediately thought, boy, I want to go over there and tell them how wrong they are. But I thought, well, I'll be respectful. But here's the reality. I've been in organizations that do that too. And you're missing the boat there. The employees are going to know whether you've created the right culture for them, irregardless of a letter. Do not issue that letter. It's disingenuous at this point.
Yeah.
So
it's more like advertising rather than anything. It's just like,
it's like marketing, right? I mean, and I always say your employees are your best marketers as an organization.
Yes.
And so if you haven't created the right culture, your marketing is not going to be good because your ambassadors are not there.
Yeah.
And so for me, it really comes down to really proactive coaching, being there, walking alongside of them. I look at what some of my colleagues have said about me from a leadership standpoint. And again, I learned from some of the best leaders that I could have ever learned from. But they will regularly say to me, "You're just the type that will just literally roll up your sleeves and be with us, even if it means it's going to impact your work." And, for me, a leader is there to be a helper. A leader is there to literally be there for that person, both personally and professionally. Because to me, it's about connection. There's nothing more important, in my opinion, for a leader than to have the opportunity to connect with another person. And so when I look at that connection, that has to mean that I'm authentically getting to know them and they're also getting to know me. And that through our journey together, we're gonna really transform not just our lives, but the organization in which we serve.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And you've mentioned it several times, this concept of coaching. Are you familiar with Jim Collins' work? I know you're a student as such. So Jim Collins, when he wrote From Good to Great, when you think about this, and this leader is listening to this, or anyone listening to this, please just absorb this for a moment here. What Geoffrey's talking about, the sense of coaching in an organization. When Jim Collins talks about taking an organization from good to great, what inside the organization needs to go from good to great for the organization to go from good to great? It's the people. So here comes clearism number 2. You can't boss someone into greatness.
Yeah.
This is why you need to become a coach, not a boss. And so what Geoffrey's sharing with us here for all industries is that highly encourage you, if anything, to take on a coaching mindset with your team. And what I loved you when you said that, people said like, you roll up your sleeves and, you help us even though you have your own work to do. Instantly, my mind's going, you are my work.
Yep.
You are the most important thing that I have to do is to help you become the best version of yourself to do your life's best work while you're in my care and beyond. that is my job.
Yeah.
But we have this, and this is where we get to that stage where other people think, I have all this stuff to do and I've got to help my people. No, you have to help your people, and then you might have some other things to do.
Yeah. Well, and I like how you said that they're in your care.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it is like, you know, your flock, right? And
Right.
you think about, I mean, that's why, like, I always say there's a lot of connections to animals when it comes to leadership, because if you think about it, animals sometimes define leadership better than humans.
Yes.
And to your point, they are in our care. And
Yeah.
ultimately we're responsible for them, which is to your earlier point, one of the reasons I call it a make it or break it moment, because as I talk about, I mean, when I presented the hymns, for example, recently on mental health in the workplace, I said to the leaders in that room, you all could be the final person to save a life or end a life. And
Yeah.
people looked at me grim, but that's the real reality when you look
Yeah.
at the data today.
Yeah.
And I just think far too many leaders are just not understanding that. They're not connecting with that because they've been barking orders for so long. They don't understand what the difference is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's and one last thing I want to touch on before we jump on the next question is you talk about this sense of belonging. And I always ask people, what does belonging mean to you? So we're talking about culture and all that stuff. So what does belonging mean to you? Or how would you define belonging?
Yeah. So to me, belonging really comes down to that everybody seeks community. And
Right.
when you have community, you're in an environment where you feel not only you're heard, but that you're also valued, appreciated,
Right.
and that you have a sense of connection and that you don't feel judged. You don't feel that there's going to be something in that environment that's not going to allow you to be who you are. And
Yeah.
so it's certainly an authentic sense. I don't want to use the word belonging, but a sense of feeling that not only you're psychologically safe, but that you have a connection to everyone else within that.
Right. And that is a beautiful way for people to understand a sense of belonging. Now, here's how you know when you have belonging in your organization is when people want to be there for a long time. They want to be long in that organization. And so like, you have a sense of belonging when people want it, but you need to do all those things Geoffrey just shared with you in order for those people to want to be there for a long time. And I think we overcomplicate things a lot in life and business. And from a leadership perspective, it's not hard when you actually care about the people as human beings first, employees second. When you provide that safety, when you make sure they feel seen, heard, valued, they feel heard and they feel a part of the herd. Getting back to the animal metaphor. Let's talk about I want to move into the future of work itself. I'm really fascinated to find out what you see as let's go to the envisioning the future, the workplace in the future, say 10 years from now. How do you see the workplace 10 years from now, Geoffrey?
Such an interesting question, because when you think about the fact that we've got 5 different generations in the workplace today with
First time
so many
ever.
variations.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think when I look at the future of the workplace is I do think we're going to have less titles.
Great.
Because I do think the younger generations, particularly the future generations, certainly I'll be old, within that frame of mind, but I think the younger generations have a very different view of leadership than a lot of the other generations. And I think in a very positive way, I would actually argue, because in many ways, not only will culture be a top priority of those organizations, it will actually drive decisions. And I'm pretty confident of that, because what we see among millennials, of which I belong to, and then certainly the additional generations following us, is a real deep concern for culture. We see a deep concern for education, and that it has to be equitable. And so, I'm incredibly encouraged around some of those things. And so when I see, 10 years from now, my hope is, first of all, that we won't have corporations who dip their toes in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. We sit in a time in 2024 that because of a presidential election and because of work of governors in certain states to restrict access to these types of things, that now corporations are taking a step back instead of taking a step forward. And I think in 10 years forward, we'll have leaders who will say, no, this is about people. And ultimately, people matter, and their diversity, their inclusion, and their equity, and their belonging matter too. And so I think those things will be absolutely paramount. At least I'm hopeful. The other piece I would say that I think without question will also change is we won't be even having these debates about whether it's in person or remote. You know, it's crazy to think we're in the US, we're still having these debates.
Yeah.
If people don't need to be in person, then think about what makes it best for them. And this
Yeah.
is one of the things that gets me very frustrated, because ultimately what I find crazy is how so out of touch some leaders can be. Just because they're remote doesn't mean anything other than the fact that they're doing their work, right?
Yeah.
The reality of it is that people that didn't do their work in person are going to be the same ones that aren't going to do their work remote. But for people who are working remote and who are being forced to come back, what people have to remember is they don't know what they're doing at home. They may be taking care of their children. They may be taking care of a parent. They may be taking care of a family member. They may have other aspects that we just don't know. And I think as leaders, if we're going to force something like that, it just demonstrates our out of touch reality with where we sit in this world. And we also don't know what's on their mind.
No.
Look at the world today. There's wars, there's tragedy. And we as leaders have to be real too. We have a mind, body, spirit to take care of. And so I think when I look ahead, that's what gives me hope is the younger generations are going to be running and leading and I don't want to say running because that's not even, doesn't really correlate with who they are. They're going to be organizing a phenomenal workplace that I'm hopeful will be a very different workplace than today.
Yeah, and even already, I know the stats here in Australia, pretty much in the next few years, about 75% of businesses will be run or organized by digital savvy millennials. I'm Gen X, so I'm right in the mix there. But my good friend Duncan Wardle, he keeps telling me all the time. He says, Dave, Gen Z and the younger generations coming don't want to work for your business, and he's not talking about me, but the just organizations in general, any leader, business owner out there, if you're going to be expecting your future workforce to be comprised of Gen Zs or even millennials, they don't want to work for you.
Yep.
Right? They don't. So because the way your organization is structured and run and led or managed.
Yep.
And so it's really, it's a big thing. And so thank you for sharing those insights. What do you think what's one common mistake you see organizations or leaders make when they're trying to adapt to the future of work? And if so, how can they avoid it?
Yeah.
Number one mistake.
So the number one mistake for me would be that leaders aren't listening to all the different generations in the workplace, and particularly the future generations. They're making the decisions with the present in mind. They're not actually making it with the future.
Right. Beautiful. And it's interesting when you said listening, because they're not listening to the people. They're not getting people involved in the work, involved in decisions about the work.
Yep.
Right. So they're not listening to them. And they have I always say, like in most traditional organizational structures, power sits at the top, but most of the information, the real important information, sits at the bottom, which is why we shouldn't even have top and bottom, but power and information rarely coexist at the same table.
Exactly.
And it's a sad state of affairs that here we are in 2024, and we still have so much work to do, Geoffrey. It's crazy.
Yep.
So let's get down to, someone as yourself, very learned person in your own right, and the work that you're doing in this world. How are you continuing to learn and grow in your field? And are there any specific habits or practices that you use to keep ahead of, or to keep up to date with what's happening?
Yeah. So certainly to your point, I mean, huge fan of a lot of reading, and really enjoy, reading all these types of topics and learn from others, and certainly engage, in the LinkedIn community as well. The other piece I have, I'm actively in right now is doing my doctorate, in leadership. And the reason I'm doing it, right, is that I felt I have to add some additional value into the aspects of what can empathy really mean in healthcare from a leadership standpoint. And I just feel that we have not trained our people right to come out and serve with empathetic leadership. And so that's one of the things I've decided to do. Certainly not an easy thing to do with as busy as I am, but I've always been a continuous learner, something I've always believed very strongly in. And so when I reached a point where I was like, I've got to contribute something, I felt that that was going to be one element of what I was going to consider doing. And so I'm actively in that as well.
Yeah, and I love that. And thank you for sharing that, because to me, leadership is a process, not a program. You can't learn leadership in 5 days and put a certificate at the back of your head and go, look at me, I'm a leader. It's an ongoing process. I've been doing leadership in many different roles, probably since officially my very first leadership role would have been 1989. So 30
Wow.
odd years. And I'm still learning.
Yep.
I'm still learning today, and I still learn new things every day, because also everything changes around us, evolving, and hence the evolving world of work that we're in and generations. And I would love to make sure that I'm a master student. If I have a mastery in anything, it would be being a student.
Yep.
Uh, so, mate, thank you so much for sharing that. I have one question left for you. I have a list of questions from 1 to 31. You get to pick a number, and then the question that correlates with that number. The other thing is you must answer the question. So if you would like to give me a number, and I will tell you what the question is that you have to answer to finish off this podcast.
23.
23. Michael Jordan. All right, here we go. 23. Okay. Life swap. Life swap. Whose shoes would you jump into for a day?
That's really intriguing. Pretty easy.
Yeah.
President Joe Biden's.
Wow. Why would you do that?
You know, since I was a young child,
Yeah.
I always had a dream and aspiration to serve as the United States president.
Right.
And, you know, about 2 years ago, I had the privilege of meeting President Biden with one of my sons, which was a great moment and experience, certainly for me to meet a U.S. president, but also to meet a U.S. president who actually embodies a lot of the right leadership qualities that office should actually have in there. And so certainly it would be a tough time to swap right now, with what's going on in the world. But I would be up to the challenge because what I know about this president is he puts the right advisors around him.
Yep.
And that's how I would feel as well. And that's the thing I would do as a leader additionally. And so that's the swap I would make.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. Geoffrey, thank you for bringing your wisdom. I know you spend a lot of time in the educational and medical world, but everything you've shared with us is relevant in every industry. And thank you firstly for the work that you are doing and caring for the carers and helping to build better leadership in those organizations. But also thank you for sharing your wisdom and insights with us on that. If people want to learn more about you, best way to reach out to you or to find out more about Geoffrey is?
Yeah, definitely connect on LinkedIn. Check out their best way to connect certainly would be on LinkedIn.
Yeah, beautiful. I'll make sure I include your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Mate, thank you so much for joining us on the Evolution of Work show today. I look forward to following your journey, and hopefully we can connect in the U.S. When I'm over there, one of my trips. Would love to sit there and see if I get up to do some golfing in North Carolina while I'm in that area, and then catch up.
It would be great.
There's some stunning courses over there.
A lot of work to do and a lot of fun to have.
Yes, well, that's right. My life motto is have fun, but get the work done.
Love that.
Yeah. So, mate, thank you so much for that. And everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of the Evolution of Work show.